Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Warcraft news. What an insane week it has been. Gameplay-wise, the pace has been quite blistering, as from last reset onwards, Blizzard have changed, well, just everything left, right, and center. Daily quests, very different. Reputation gains, very different. Corrupted gear, also very different. Much of this is good for the game, and with the raid being out, I've got to say, I've been having a blast playing World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft is an unbalanced game, and I think 8.3 really shows that. Yes, a massive waste of potential with the worst expansion ending in ages, but also an incredibly fun raid, incredibly fun vision, so the gameplay is great. And that means we've got a lot to cover. But first, Patreon. It's a big month, dwarves and hunters. Do you want art? Well, you'll get that, plus the hunter pin, which is the first of our year-long class pin collection. They got hit by Chinese New Year though, so they will ship out to you separately as soon as they arrive in our office, which should be around February 7th. Shipping is included, and well, with times like this, Patreon really is the core of what we do. Their support is absolutely essential, and they also get sweet loot from it as well. It's a pretty great setup, so we really appreciate that. You can check it out down below, and with that said, let's get going. So, remember how daily quests didn't really matter that much in 8.3? Well, that's a thing of the past now. Blizzard have vastly increased the rewards. They now drop 250 coalescing visions and 125 reputation, with war mode bonuses applying on top of that. And this actually means the dailies are worth doing. They will get you another vision. Taliesin talked about, liking how they felt optional, as did Preach. Many players agreed, but others kind of asked, well, what's the point of putting content in the game if it's not worth doing? And to be honest, I was in that latter camp. My perspective was more like, is it not depressing that we're happy the stuff they put in the patch is not needed? So compounded on this was the vast majority of players, I think, asking for more vision entries per week, because that was a really fun bit of content. Well, rather than decrease the cost of doing a horrific vision, Blizzard instead have decided to give us more visions by making the daily quest be something we want to do. Now, this is a super interesting situation because, as an example, I both agree and disagree with Preach. If all you care about is raiding, then yeah, the dailies not mattering, that's a pretty great thing. I mean, just think about WoD. You could just raid and pretty much be happy. If you don't like the dailies, then yeah, them not mattering is also a great thing. I do, though, think this entire discussion has got very muddled. I don't think this stuff should matter for raiders, but I do think it should matter generally. If we are glad that content doesn't matter, that is a depressing place for the game to be in, and I mean, at the very least, there's dev work that's basically useless then. So yeah, I do not think that these dailies should be important for player power progression. Not at all. I don't think that. I do, though, think they should matter, and that is where the past enters, and that's where the problems of the present become so very clear. If you wanted a Netherwing Drake, you would go and do their dailies. Same for Sketis. If you wanted the Argent Tournament Mounts or the Pandaria Serpents, you'd go do the dailies. If you're a raider, you didn't want those mounts, you didn't have to do them. And that is the problem of the present. Blizzard have homogenized all of their systems. They are all under one progression umbrella. Dailies and world quests play into reps. Those reps have essences. They also give artifact power, which progresses your player power. They also give you coalescing visions. And that means, well, you need to do them because they're going to upgrade your cloak and get you more corrupted gear, which is very powerful. Do you see the problem here, right? I imagine a world with way more dailies and way more factions that are all way more unique and way more rewards. But, one where the reason why Preach was so happy with this patch still remains true, that those things don't matter for your raw power. If everything is interdependent and matters for everyone who's playing the game, then any problems in any of those systems for any players will be felt. Thing is, Blizzard limits to designing a one-size-fits-all thing, and the best content in WoW is not one-size-fits-all. It's Chromie, it's Mage Towers, raids, things like that. Even one-off reps that were decently memorable. I mean, Netherwing. Was the content thrilling there? No, but you were not forced to do it. You only did it if you opted in, and therefore it felt okay to do. So, Blizzard were right to buff the dailies for some people, and wrong for others. They were right to have them not matter for some people, and wrong for others. That's the entire point here. It's not one size fits all. It obviously is not fit for purpose. And this leads me to Shadowland's concern. Covenants. Covenants are a one-size-fits-all expansion-defining system. I'll probably love them as a casual raider who's not going to, I'm not going to break my back for a little bit more performance, but if I was 100% raid and gameplay focused, I imagine I'd feel like, I think Preach might, because I know he's been very concerned about that system, as have I, and for the same reasons. So that's my feedback. Blizzard, build a broad game on solid foundations, not a tremendously tall Jenga tower, and that's what you're doing. Now, of course, if I've misrepresented what Preach or Tally have said, and I don't believe I have, but if I have, then I apologize, and I will clarify if they get in contact. But I think that's basically the situation. One-size-fits-all things do not work, and this whole thing about the dailies, I think, is such clear, obvious proof of that. Okay, with that said, raiding. I'm back. Finally. And it feels good. I mean, for me, recent raiding memories, that's, for me, still Throne of Thunder 10 and the Council fight. Sure, I raided Siege of Orgrimmar, High Mall, and Foundry, but after that, it just kind of fell by the wayside as the social circles crumbled in-game, and I'm sure that's a position that many of you have been, found yourself in. Well, I'm back, I'm raiding, and I'm having a blast. And you know what? Playing a more simple class like Demon Hunter, that has worked out great, because it means I'm the one who's opting into the extra mechanics, things like, say, the Zanesh football. And, for us, having to fill 4 spots with pugs isn't ideal, but thanks to a great tank duo that, I think we'd actually almost buy their server transfer for them to get them in our guild. It was a really good run. Now, the plan is to get curved quickly on Heroic, but we just bantered around in normal the last raid night. We got to about halfway through Vexiona, and you know what? So far, it's great. These fights, I really love them. I think there's a really well-conceived core essence in them, especially, is it Mott or Mout? One of those. I really like that. Zanesh was a bit easy, but had some, I think it was quite fun if I was, doing the football. And still, on normal, they were obviously a bit more simplistic. I'm definitely hungry for the heroic mechanics, and I've got to admit, it's just so much fun. It probably would be less fun if I was, not on the sort of optional mechanics team for the raid, but still, I think it shows what we've always known here. Blizzard make fantastic raids. I cannot wait to get into Heroic. I want to see what they're doing there. I'm excited to progress my character in the game. To be an absolute disgusting padder, to obsess on my percentiles and that big bar and to get it bigger. It's so good to be back. And as I said at the top of the video, it just does go to show how unbalanced World of Warcraft is. Some stuff is incredible like this, but just look at the raid's ending cinematic, look at the bugs. If everything was as fun as my first night in that raid, this game would be in such a great place. And going into Shadowlands Beta, really, that's my intention, to make things all up to that quality or to help. I am more fired up than ever to get deep into feedback. And on that, I just want to cover negativity. I'm going to be honest with you all the time. I think the expansion ending sucked balls and was an embarrassment. I also think the raid's incredibly fun. Do you see the point? We don't have a party line. We call it as we see it with maximal honesty, and that pisses a lot of people off in the comments. And you know what? Fine. Those people can be pissed off. I'm always going to be honest to you, and I'm always going to be honest with Blizzard themselves. And I think this patch just shows the need for that. There are good things. There are bad things. We can have a multifaceted opinion that actually gets all of them, right? That acknowledges the bad, acknowledges the good, praises the good, and comes down like a hammer of wrath on the bad, because there's times where, like with that ending and that Lord of the Rings ripoff, it is deserved. And next up, trash. Remember Kor'kron Dark Shamans? I sure do. Ny'alotha has a lot of trash in many places, as many people have pointed out, myself included. Some, like say that before Mott, I think is a really great introduction to mechanics, but in terms of just game time, I will admit I do feel like that balance was a little bit off. That said, there's one nice thing that I want to call out here. 4 of the mini-bosses dropped 200 corrupted mementos. Now, those mini-bosses, I felt good about fighting them. Why? Well, because it feels like I'm progressing towards my goals, and it actually reminds me of Icecrown Citadel's mini-bosses. Now, there, you get a mini-boss every week in ICC. That would give you a bag of stuff plus some badges of frost, and it felt quite good to do. So I'm glad they've actually understood that in Ny'alotha. I think that's a really good lesson for them. But yeah, the trash is decently laborious. That said, our raid of 10 got 3 BOEs through it, so I've got to wonder if Blizzard knew it was a lot of trash and put a whole bunch of BOEs in to try to get it to feel better, or if that's just what their design is, to have more trash but also more BOEs. Kind of hard to tell right now, but it's certainly, I'd say it's a little bit much, maybe tone it down. But good, good work in the mini-bosses. Next up, corrupted gear. Okay, we've got another Infinite Stars nerf, but more importantly here, Blizzard have actually changed the mechanics of some bits of corrupted gear. So, Infinite Stars, Twisted Appendage, and Gushing Wounds are now scaling off your item level. You see, previously, they scaled on your character's AP and SP, and that meant that if, you say got a 420 with a really good bit of corruption, like I did with my Void Ritual, or not Void Ritual, the one that pulses out was really good. If you just got that 420, well, because your character's got loads of AP or SP, you just have that one bit of gear doing insane amounts of DPS for your character. And it's funny because this is the team who have consistently said they want item level to be king in most cases, yet since a long time, they've just had a very rocky relationship with that. Now, this change will greatly impact the power of corrupted gear, though, oddly, the Void one that's currently on my character, giving me like 5 to 10% of my DPS for free, it's not impacted. That's maybe because it scales differently off, like, the percentage of your max health. It's probably the strongest, post-nerf, but I imagine it will be nerfed. But hey, hopefully not before my Sunday raid. Now, I think this is a good move for balance, but I think once again, it does show us something I think that's very obvious. This patch was not launched in a great state. Ian did say that it benefited from a long PTR in an interview. I think there's aspects there where I do agree with him, but, obviously there have been a lot of issues. There's a lot of glaring balance problems that I think basically everyone called beforehand would have been an issue. And they were an issue. I think that just does prove that this one really had a tough time getting out the gate. That said, raid bots and Blood Mallet are certainly going to be doing well off this, and I'm sure they have, a lot of work to do, especially for Blood Mallet, upgrading those graphs. Okay, next up, bugs. Come on, it's an 8.3 video, there's gotta be some bugs. Right, Darkshore, it popped just before server resets, but unexpectedly, Heroic was available for those factions after reset. This is a bit interesting for the Mythic race. It was not intended, but it is something that happened, and Blizzard have decided to let it slide and let it continue. And I think this is just a case if they didn't want it to happen, but the genie's out, you can't stuff it back in the bottle, it just is how it is. I also mentioned the war mode boosting daily quest rewards. That was actually, it was a bug that meant that didn't happen. It's now fixed. What's interesting though is that 30% of 250 is a lot more than 30% of 50, and that will make war mode quite a bit more lucrative, especially for EU Alliance like myself. Then next up, the Auction House mail has finally been delivered, so you should have your gold, and past that, there's just been so many hotfixes, it's kind of hard to cover them all, but suffice to say, loads of balance tweaks, loads of fixes, though Juen's attacks, or auto attacks are scaled down by 80%. His abilities are double or twice as strong now, but he's going to be a bit less of a rare mob destroyer. Then for Nyalotha, well, Il'gynoth's spawning problem has been fixed, the normal and heroic, and apparently your gifts of N'Zoth should be returned to you. Then finally for the bugs, for certain Mac users, you're still a little bit out of luck. For context, basically in MacBook Pros for loads of people, WoW has just literally not worked since 8.3, and right now there are no updates. It's ran just fine in my late 2019 MacBook Pro with the Radeon Pro 5500M graphics that I use for work, so it works for me, but obviously it's not working for everyone. There's definitely a big issue there. Blizzard need to fix that as soon as possible. And I would say also to issue refunds or free game time for people who have been impacted, because I think that is that's a level of acceptability that's really not that okay. Anyway, with that, I want to finish this video by talking about the breadth of experience in World of Warcraft and how that meshes with game design, because as I think is very obvious with the daily quest situation, there's just such an obvious encapsulation of this whole thing. World of Warcraft is played in many different ways, right? It's got many different aspects to it. We're in a situation where, the end of the expansion storyline sucked, and it had a pretty, inoffensive storyline that, in my view, wasn't really that great, bar some of the Rathian stuff being nice. But on the other hand, I've really enjoyed the raid. The gameplay's been fantastic. But, if I wanted to play this patch for more broad reasons, I wouldn't really be able to, because it's a extremely gameplay, character progression focused patch. And really, as we go into Shadowlands, it is that broadening of the WoW experience. Early on in this video, I talked about how because everything is homogenized into AP and the resources for the vision runs, which give you gear, and the gear is really important. It gives you research, so you can get further into the vision run, so you can get even more gear that's better, blah, 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 right? Because it's all, homogenized into character power progression, and there's only a few things like, the 30-day, insect mount to get. That means that WoW is just this big Jenga tower, and if any part of that tower breaks, the whole thing sort of falls down and really just tanks the gameplay experience. Like, if you absolutely love raiding, but you hate to death those dailies, and you feel like you've got to do the dailies to raid, you can see how the knock-on effect of those dailies really impacts your raid. Whereas if you had some kind of grindy, annoying dailies, but they were for some really cool mounts and there's some story quests associated with their faction, but you didn't need to do them unless you wanted to, you'd feel a bit more okay about them, and you know, it wouldn't say impact the quality of the raid or Mythic Plus experience. And really, that's the key for me, right? It is that broadening of the World of Warcraft gameplay experience. It is that decoupling of things, such that if you're a raider, you can just, you know, have your raid days be focused on your raid, you do your stuff throughout the week, but you know, there's none of these humongous dependencies. I always think back to the past, right? You do some Argent tournament, you probably have to do some Argent tournament, but after that, you know, you could keep on doing it if you wanted the mounts. And for loads of people, that was a nice, fun, opt-in thing that kept them going in the game for ages. I feel like right now we've really got away from that, away from like the Netherwing and the Scatis, those things, or just, you know, little optional things you could do that really did add to the overall gameplay experience, but were not super mandatory. That is the big core, and Blizzard, when we're going into Shadowlands, I would implore you, do as much as you can to ensure that the Covenant feature is kind of in line with that. That, you know, if there's one aspect of Covenants that people don't really like, that it's not so tied to like actual power progression that it could tank an entire expansion. Let's be real, Legion suffered those problems, but it had so many positives that it was okay. Battle for Azeroth didn't have those positives, and it suffered even greater from its incarnation of those problems. I just hope and pray that Shadowlands does not have that. So Blizzard, you've got to, I just think that daily quest sort of thing, for me, that's just like such a perfect example that it really just can be applied broadly. So I'd love to hear what your feedback is on that. And I have it on very good authority that Blizzard themselves do want to hear what your feedback is on that. So as we go into beta, you'll see a little bit more about my plans to help the WoW team with communication and try to get some of our opinions to them in a way that's quite digestible. So, I mean, expect feedback forums and things like that, because for me, Shadowlands is do or die, it's make or break, and it's really important that that beta test is the best damn beta test there's ever been. And there's a lot of us here in this channel, you know, the sub number certainly has increased over the 6 years, and that does mean that if we actually put our heads together, we can be a very strong collective force for improvement. So that is my goal, that's what I think. Let me know what you think, and with that, thank you very much for watching this video, and I will see you next time.
Mm-hmm.